on the topic of connectivity, we have as our next speaker, Mr. Arvind Mehra, Executive Director and CEO, Mahindra Aerospace. He also serves as a current director on the board of the General Aircraft Manufacturing Association in the United States and is a member of FICCI India and Confederation of Indian Industry. Today, Mr. Arvind will speak about the growing importance of aviation in connecting communities, particularly remote regions, and the importance of aviation as an enabler of economic growth. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and welcome Mr. Arvind Mehra.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to be here, and thank you very much for giving me this opportunity, and especially INZBC. I've been to Australia probably 50 times, and I regret why I didn't choose to fly to New Zealand. And people used to say it's very far off, especially my Australian friends. But I think it's been very welcoming, and it's my pleasure, and especially when my team starts to say that when do we plan the next one. I represent a very large group which is very diversified. It's Mahindra & Mahindra, which was formed more than 60 years ago, started as an automobile company. And today we are more than $20 billion, and we spread across various businesses. So I may be representing aviation particularly, but I think the group has an opportunity all across various businesses. So even though I'm using the opportunity of India, this aviation summit, but I think it's far beyond aviation we can talk about. Aerospace was a business which fortunately I started for the group about 10 years ago. But if you look at the total global footprint, we are we're present in more than 100 countries, and we have more than 250,000 employees. When we talk of aerospace, I look after two businesses in aerospace. One is aircraft business, which fortunately started our journey in aerospace. We bought a company in Australia. We invested more than $100 million in Australia in terms of expanding. And the second part of the business came up by us acquiring the facility of Boeing in Port Melbourne and shifting the entire plant to India. And today we are producing parts for almost every aircraft you can think of. So when you fly a new Airbus or a Boeing aircraft, it definitely has something built by us. As I said, in the aerospace business, I'll talk more specifically on the aircraft side because that's more relevant to the subject we're talking about. We are certified in more than 43 countries. We have more than 240 aircraft flying, and you'll be pleased to know we got 16 of these aircraft flying in New Zealand with 7 operators, so most of them flying out of Queenstown. So when you sit in a nice little aircraft, which is an 8-seater, and the only aircraft in the world which provides you an aisle in an 8-seater and something called a business class if you sit on the last seat. Coming to aviation, which is the subject of today's conversation, most of us, when we talk aviation, we misunderstand aviation to be connectivity, ease of flying. But I always tell people it's a very large enabler to GDP as well as creating employment worldwide. It's quite similar to what telecom did in most developing countries. And fortunately, I used to head what is India's largest telecom company today, and I can bring the relevance to both the businesses, how telecom did what aviation growth is going to do. $2.7 trillion is the contribution aviation makes to the GDP of the world, and 62 million jobs it creates. And 1.2 billion tourists cross borders, and 50% of them travel by air. And it's going to grow. And the reason why it's going to grow is, first of all, there's a sustained growth in the economic parameter if you go across various countries around the world. There's a very strange thing which is happening, which is very natural to any growing business. The airlines fold, they consolidate, but they also become competitive because you remove wastage. The regulatory regime is changing. The regulator is becoming more and more obvious to the fact that aviation is not for the elitist. Aviation is a very core requirement for people to travel. By 2034, 99 million jobs will be created by aviation, and it'll continue to grow. And very interestingly, since this is the part we all belong to, Asia Pacific is the region which is going to contribute to maximum growth. 5 out of 10 countries who are treated or supposed to be growing actually belong to this region. And in 2010, APAC actually took over North America in terms of revenue per kilometer generated by aviation. If you talk of growth in Asia Pacific, as I said, there are strong enablers. This is that part of the world which is growing. By 2034, we expect 44 million jobs to come out of aviation and aviation-related community. And it will continue to grow almost 6%, almost year on year. When we talk of general aviation, and I'm selfishly using this to demonstrate and showcase to you the aircraft we make and the aircraft which flies in this part of the world. So if you end up being in Milford Sound, so you go to Queenstown, I guess quite a lot of time you'll actually fly on the aircraft we build. But my subject here is that when we talk aviation, it's generally misunderstood to be commercial aviation, and we forget and disregard general aviation. And it's evident by the fact that I'm the only one who's representing general aviation in the whole aviation community, which is sitting here. Most of the people and very distinguished speakers spoke about commercial aviation, but we tend to forget that it's general aviation which is going to be the what you call last mile connectivity, remote connectivity. If you talk general aviation, 446,000 aircrafts have been introduced in general aviation till date. And in last year alone, $23.9 billion worth of sales actually represented general aviation. So when you talk about Boeings and Airbus, we forget there are many aircraft which are getting added in the smaller segment. And that's a segment which is going to become an enabler, because typically you will connect remote regions with general aviation, smaller aircrafts, and as the traffic build up, you then bring larger aircrafts. And why is it relevant? First of all, it makes connectivity easy. Most of you will not fly to Milford Sound sightseeing on a Boeing 737. Second advantage is most of the tourists who actually go for tourism are not interested in flying at 800 kilometers an hour. That they leave for the fact that you connect country to country. You want to fly as slow as possible because that's where you want to see the scenic beauty of it. And then comes medical tourism and a lot of other enablers which are making it very easy for this sector to grow. I will quickly use two very good examples which are very relevant to New Zealand when I talk of New Zealand. And I picked up Alaska, which is very similar to when you call tourism connectivity for this part of the world. We've got about 14 of our 60 aircrafts flying in Alaska. And I've spent quite a lot of time understanding that market. And one of the key enablers for Alaskan growth was U.S. Essential Air Service Program, which actually mandates providing connectivity. And they realized very early in life that to connect, they don't need to fly larger aircraft. So today you could fly smallest possible aircraft. Alaska probably is the only place in the world when you're driving on the road in Anchorage, you will see a signboard, aircraft as a right of way. So if you see an aircraft coming, you stand up and wait. And that happens. So when I went the first time, I couldn't believe my eyes, but it did happen. And the fact is there are about 18,000 aircrafts in Alaska which will require to be replaced over the next few years. And that's the kind of opportunity which general aviation brings. But more importantly, when general aviation connects those communities, you will have a social impact of it. You will see patients getting faster treatment. I'm working on a similar experiment with Canada where we're working with the government, and very typically they found that the diabetes in First Nations is increasing. How do we bring connectivity? And one of the projects we're working is to bring patients back to nearest community, which otherwise will take about 8 hours to come. Coming to Botswana, 2.2 million people, very small country, and the biggest source of income is tourism. And we have 31 aircrafts flying out of one single airport. So you go to that airport, every minute one aircraft is taking off. And they rely purely on these aircrafts to take people to deltas. They fly over delta, they go to the lodge, they stay there. And you'll be surprised to know they're booked till 2020. because they realized that just relying on diamonds is not going to help. And they're making a significant difference. In fact, I'm carrying that experience back to the country to say, look, this is where we have to learn. Coming to New Zealand, and I must say I became very fond of this country and the warmth I saw yesterday. Probably this must be the fastest and the most friendliest immigration I ever encountered. When you come to New Zealand aviation, I don't know how many of you know that there are 5,221 general aviation aircrafts in this country. So I feel that we are a very small drop in the ocean when it comes to us as a company. Therefore, I think it's late. We never came earlier, and I think it's probably good for me to come back and get more exposure to this market. But again, it was facilitated, one, by need, because New Zealand needed connectivity. And the second is you have a regulator who's probably far better than many others in the world, who understands how to make it easy for people to fly. And once again, what is the opportunity which India and New Zealand can have between themselves? India, as I said, is a very fast-growing economy, a very fast-growing civil aviation market, but we are very primitive when it comes to regulations. We still haven't learned the difference between commercial and general aviation. And therefore, there is a lot which needs to be done. And there's plenty of opportunity which companies across New Zealand can experience and share and of course, participate. It comes from training being one. India needs a lot of pilots to be trained. It comes from MRO sector, it comes from airport constructions, it comes from connectivity, technology, and a lot of our stuff. The only thing is that mentally we have to get out of this block to say we're too far off. While I see the demands for people to do a direct flight from Auckland to New Delhi, but in today's world, with the connectivity and hubs all across, I think flying is only equal to shutting the door, closing your eyes, watching a movie, and you land at the next destination. And I wish you all the best for this wonderful summit. And I finished 26 seconds before I was supposed to. And thank you very much. It's a pleasure.